Perfect.
Before you even have to say it.
Awesome. Hi everyone. It's so great to see you all. It's been a few months. Hope you all had a great summer off, and we're so excited to kick off another year of the Canadian Cheese Collective. So there's a lot of familiar faces on here, but a few new ones too. So for anybody who's new and joining for the first time, just a quick overview of the Canadian Cheese Collective. So we know that Canada is a massive, massive country, and unfortunately, we're not able to get together in person as often as we'd like. So Zoom is the perfect way to connect with each other. And Aaron and I just really want to build some cheese community and some camaraderie in the industry and really create educational opportunities. So through these calls, we've been interviewing some industry experts, both from Canada and abroad. And we're just so excited that you joined. So the fact that you're all here, that's why we do it. So thank you for being here, and please continue to come and tell more people. We'd love to see more people joining. But today, without further ado, we're going to be chatting with Shep of Gunn's Hill Artisan Cheese. So, Shep, welcome.
Well, you're muted.
Thank you very much for having me here today.
Yeah,
I feel like I know the vast majority of us on the call here, so that's great as well.
yeah, awesome.
Okay, yeah. When I look at the list, we have everybody from cheesemongers and cheesemakers and distributors and people who are doing an awesome job sampling product in stores, category managers, people who work in stores and markets. And yeah, it's just really cool. We really have a great cross section of the industry showing up, and that's what we wanted. So thank you for coming. So are we jumping into the questions right away, Kelsey?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay. So can you tell us, Shep, can you tell us a bit about Gunn's Hill Artisan Cheese?
Sure. I'm going to give you the real quick version because like I said, I feel like I've met most of you on this call already at some point in time, or at least talked to you. But we've been around for 12 years now, making cheese just in Oxford County. My family has a dairy farm. It used to be run by my parents. Now it's my brother and sister-in-law that run it. So the dairy farm's kind of across the field, and then all the milk that we use to make our cheeses come from there. Most of what we produce are based on different Swiss-style cheeses, plus obviously some fresh cheese curds, and then also a brie-style cheese. But the bulk of what we make are all more firm-type cheeses. Um, it's been a great 12 years. We can't complain at all. We kind of got started fairly early in the wave of specialty cheese and specialty products in general, and we kind of grew with the industry as a whole. And so we were kind of really lucky on our timing and also just the general acceptance and enjoyment of our cheeses.
That's awesome. So, Shep, can you tell us, how did you develop your cheeses? How did you come up with those recipes?
So basically, I don't have a formal cheese making background or education. So when I wanted to get into making cheese, I just got experience where I could get experience. And then what we're producing here is largely based on a bunch of those experiences, plus what we ran into or what I ran into. Um, One of the key parts of my experience was making cheese up in the Alps for a summer in Berner Oberland, which is the closest city that people might recognize was Interlaken. Um, but I didn't actually know a whole lot of about cheeses before then. And so when I was there, I got exposed to all these different types of Swiss Alpine cheeses. Um, Probably before going there, I was like a lot of other people, just thinking that Swiss cheese is the cheese with the big holes in it. And then all of a sudden I discovered Appenzeller and Spreens and these different mountain cheeses. And so then I thought, I'm not seeing a lot of this in Canada. And so went about developing recipes that were along those lines.
That's awesome. And you've developed so many other cheeses over the years, and sounds like you continue to do R&D today. What What are you working on these days? Are you developing anything unique and special? Anything on the go right now?
So there's always people ask, like, so when I first started out, I just wanted to do like one or two or three main things and then solely focus on them. Kind of like is what's more typical in Europe, where they're just making one type of cheese for the most part in a plant. But I figured out pretty quickly that that wasn't exactly what Canadians were looking for, and we were always getting asked for different things. And even to this day, like people are just they want something new. So what's new? What's new? So just to keep the excitement going, we've done some different things over the years and tried to speed it up a little bit more recently. So maybe about a year ago, we just for fun we did a feta type cheese, mostly just for our own retail shop here to see what people would think. It was a bit of a disaster. It got all moldy and gross, and so then we just threw it all out. We did it again, and then we started selling it about a week ago, and that was significantly better this time. It's not perfect yet, but I really like this one versus the previous one, and same with people that have tried it so far. Another thing that we've been working on for a long time is something that's more traditional to this area. So traditionally here in Oxford County, there were so many small cheddar cheese factories, and lots of the people that come in our shop still are always asking for a cheddar type cheese. And I never wanted to make a cheddar type cheese, but the people are asking for it again and again and again. And so I have to humble myself a little bit, we'll say. And we've started working on a more traditional style cheddar type cheese. This one's been a long time in the works. We've been working on it for a couple of years now. It's getting better. It's not quite where I want it yet, but you know, this will be like with a cloth on it and stuff like that. And hopefully, specifically people in our area will be able to enjoy that sometime in the next year or so.
Oh, that's really cool. How do you find that balance between what you want to do and what your customers are asking for?
Uh, well, I think I found that more recently, like especially in the last couple of years, we've really put effort into the last for since we started about always trying to make our things better, always trying to improve, always trying to like correct small little deficiencies that there are. And that's getting we're kind of getting more and more precise in terms of where we want to be. And so then and in addition, we have some great people working for us here. And so now just for myself personally, I like to keep things fresh and try new things. And so then the way I'm doing that right now is by trying out new recipes, and some of them are working and some need more work. But this is kind of keeping things fresh for me too now. And then also our staff here, they like to try new things, and so it always makes everyone excited here when we do a new test batch of whatever it's going to be.
So there was a question here asking if you're going to make Sazerac again.
Yeah. So what we used to do is we used to take Sazerac, and then we would marinate the cheese in that particular alcohol. Um, we've done that with a bunch of different things. Like, so we've got our Tipsy that's marinated in red wine. We have our Dark Side of the Moon that's marinated in a chocolate stout beer. The Sazerac one we did for a little bit, and then we kind of went away with it. It wasn't terribly popular, and so that's why it's kind of disappeared from the list. We've tried that with a whole bunch of different flavors of things over the last couple of years. Some have stuck around, some have kind of disappeared. And I think that's kind of been a good way to just keep trying new things too. Flavors are like an easy way to just try something new and kind of see what the uptake for it will be.
Yeah. Okay, so changing topics. Guns Hill addresses many social issues, things like LGBTQ plus rights, supporting First Nations communities, supporting new immigrants like those who arrived from Ukraine during the war. Can you tell us tonight why those initiatives matter to Guns Hill and how they have benefited the community?
Yeah, so I guess for us, it's really important to kind of to stick up for people that sometimes are kind of pushed down by society as a whole. This is like I can't take most of the credit for this kind of action that we do goes to my partner Colleen. She's very passionate about a number of things, specifically about Indigenous rights and also her LGBTQ students and people in our community. And so we've tried to do a lot that just makes our environment inclusive for everybody. And so some of those things have had some backlash, especially in our very specific community. There's quite a large community that's close by us that's really kind of pushing against some of against LGBTQ rights. And so then I guess we felt that our position in the community is to kind of to push back a little bit. And so the goal is not to push back and be antagonistic, but it's just to make sure that you might live in Ontario or Woodstock, Ontario, or Norwich, Ontario. You might not feel that you're accepted in some places, but we want to make sure that you feel like you're going to be accepted here. And a lot of this comes from the fact that Colleen's a high school teacher and she deals with students all the time, and she runs a Gay Straight Alliance there and also an Indigenous club. And those are some of the students that are struggling most in high school. And so we feel like it's really important that we kind of try and help those kids that are, or do our best to kind of make a safe space for these kids that are really, really struggling in schools and just in society as a whole.
And so like a part two to that question, you mentioned that the business has had a little bit of backlash. Has any of the backlash that you guys have received damaged the business in any way, or has it really just been like noise that's just there?
I like we've lost customers, put it that way. Especially like local ones in our specific area. And then there's a couple of businesses that have stopped buying from us as well in the Woodstock area because of our stance on some of these positions. And it's too bad. I mean, but I guess that's kind of that's the way they feel. And so then we're just happy to continue going on. Like if they don't want our cheese, that's fine. That's their choice, but they're missing out, to be honest.
I think we would all agree that they're definitely missing out on how good the cheese is, for one, and number two, for supporting people in the community. But you know, and would you say that like the amount of customers that you've lost has really been noticeable, or does it like, do you grow then in other ways as well to make up for it?
It's hard to say. And so you know, this has really kind of become an issue locally in the last, we'll say, year and a half. And so that's kind of when we face some more backlash. But also, I would say in the last year, our sales have kind of leveled off. And so I can't say specifically it's for one thing or for another thing. My feeling, though, is that overall, I think the artisan cheese industry is, well, I don't think, I'm pretty sure the artisan cheese industry is kind of stagnated in the last year and a half or so. My assumption is it's largely due to inflation. And so looking at a bunch of the numbers, speaking to a lot of my colleagues and our customers and whatnot, I feel like it's not just something that's unique to us right now. And so then that makes me feel like it's less likely to be caused by this particular backlash. And then probably in other places, you know, we have got a lot of people in our corner that are always kind of cheering for us when we are trying to stand up in our community. And so then I know that has a positive impact too.
Thank you thank you for talking about that. It's really important that we continue a conversation there.
Yeah, all of your advocacy just makes me want to buy your cheese even more. So
Same.
You're doing the right thing.
Same. Okay, Kelsey, you're up next.
So, besides what we just talked about, you know, I'm sure, you know, cheese making has many ups and downs, and it's not all going to be easy. Can you tell us about some of the obstacles that you've faced over the past 12 years of running business and the previous years getting it started? So what were those obstacles and how did you overcome them?
Like we haven't had any like major obstacles that we'd have to overcome. So like I guess part of it is like when you're getting started, like everybody knows starting any kind of business, but especially a business in the food industry, there's lots of regulatory hurdles to go over. I'm always of the opinion that you might as well just work with everybody because like they're fighting against your inspector, for example, is never going to get you any further ahead. And so I've always tried to cooperate, and I think that's worked out really well for us. Like I think we got things going in a very quick timeline, I know. And so I know that that really helped us there. First, when we first started out, it was more difficult in terms of we dealt with some things that were making our cheese less desirable. And at the very beginning, there's a whole bunch of cheese that we just couldn't sell as like proper Five Brothers, for example. And so that was a hurdle to get over because I got started. I'm like, I need to build some inventory because we got to get cheeses aging, but then they weren't all where they needed to be. And so that's the time in your business cycle too, where you're like, oh, you can't afford to lose anything. And so that was kind of a big hurdle at the beginning. And financing that kind of inventory growth when you're dealing with problems like that is also super difficult. Now, once again, very fortunate for me. Like I had a family that had the means to be able to loan me additional money when I needed it to continue to do what we were doing. And so, I'm really fortunate in that department. And then over the years, like things have grown, and it's just been, I think some of the things that I struggle with over time is, and this is like more to do with me as a person. Like as a person, I'm somebody that's kind of, we'll say I'm conflict averse. I don't like to kind of get into intense emotional debates with people. And so I've always had a hard time when people come at me with complaints, like especially when they come at me with a complaint that's quite intense. And so that's something that I really had to work on. And I still continue to have to work on because, people, if they're buying expensive cheese, they're expecting something that's quite good. And if it's not where they want it to be, obviously, they are going to be upset. And some people get super upset. But it's learning how to deal with that and then just kind of continue to roll forward and not take it personally. That said, like based on those characteristics of mine, I feel like I'm in the right business because say you're a mechanic and people come to you, like they're coming to you with a problem all the time. So nobody's ever happy when they're coming to you. Where if you're in the cheese business, people are coming to you, they're thinking about the party that they're going to have with their friends. And in general, like it's a positive thing. It tastes good. Like it's just kind of has a lot of positive feelings around it. And so at the same time, I'm doing the right thing in terms of that. So that's another, like this, dealing with and just trying not to take certain complaints personally, and then also just to deal with them in an effective way.
Okay, so and there's lots of great comments or questions and comments coming in on the chat there. I think at the end we'll go back and answer a couple of them. We can't get to everything, but we'll come back. There's a couple good ones in there. Not that they're not all great, but you know what I mean. Okay, so question here. This is a big topic. So sustainability and climate change are two difficult but necessary topics for all of us in this industry to acknowledge and discuss. Have you considered implementing any specific practices at Gunn's Hill that would support sustainability? And then there's a part two to that question as well.
So we do have a bunch of things that we're doing. I always find this one a little bit difficult just because the fact that if you think about sustainability, like dairy is pretty intense, just like meat production, dairy production is as well. But at the same time, there's no reason that we can't work to kind of make it less impactful and less sustainable. So some of the things that
sorry to cut you off. I apologize, but when you say dairy is sort of intense, what are you referring to? It's like the carbon footprint of dairy is quite impactful to sustainability and climate change. Are there like specific points that you could mention about it that we just can't ever get past because they are kind of what they are?
Well, I think like in terms of like I can't remember the exact statistics, but if you look at how much carbon it takes to produce a calorie of food and like what it takes to produce a calorie of cheese versus a calorie of beef versus a calorie of chicken versus a calorie of carrots and stuff like that. Like obviously like, carrots, soybeans, corn is going to beat out dairy any day of the week. Now that said, there's parts of the industry too that are using stuff. And so some of the things that are kind of cool that are happening on our farm specifically is the farm uses an incredible amount of waste or food waste, we'll call it, from the food industry. So from the human food industry. So For example, in Ingersoll, close by us, there's the big plant called Bonduelle. Bonduelle is a big French company.
Yep.
But in the area, a lot of farms grow like peas, or they'll go green beans, squash, sweet corn, stuff like that. And then Bonduelle takes it in, they package it all up, they freeze it, and you got your bag of frozen vegetables. In that process, there's a whole lot of waste. And so, for example, peas are the worst, because if anybody's ever shucked peas, you know, it takes forever by hand. So they have these fancy machines that will harvest it for you. The problem with those fancy machines is a lot of the peas get ticked, nicked, broken, and so then they can't go through because I don't know why, but maybe they don't stay properly. So about 70% don't make it through. Then those 70% end up going to the farm here, or to my brother's beef farm. And peas are a great feed, right? It's high in protein. And so then it decreases feed costs, but also uses up a lot of this waste. Another example would be carrots, like carrots in the fall. Like a whole bunch of carrots get processed, we get the carrots in, and then that kind of gets incorporated into the ration. The sweet corn industry is a huge one. So a lot of sweet corn that you get right now comes in those little trays. They're all kind of peeled, all 4 perfect little cobs right in a little styrofoam tray, which is a bit bizarre. But anyways, they all have to fit in that tray. So the big ones get thrown, the small ones get thrown. All the leaves have to get thrown. And so then all of that stuff they take in, and that gets fed to the cows. So those are kind of neat ways that we can take waste from one side of the food industry and then use it in another side, and it doesn't get thrown away or composted or whatever.
You find that impacts the flavor of the milk or the cheese?
Not too much for the most part, because most of these things are kind of, you can't feed too much of these things because they're quite wet, and so then it makes the feed super wet. But one thing you do see, for example, is when the cows are getting carrots in the fall, like we know that beta carotene is what gives cheese its yellowish color. So fall milk for us specifically will have more of a yellowish color just because they're getting carrots, and carrots are super high in beta carotene, like way higher than grass, for example.
That's cool.
But yeah, some other cool things that we're doing is on the farm, they've got solar panels on the roof. So the solar panels there can generate enough energy to run the farm and the factory on a sunny day, for example. Now it's like all solar systems, it's getting sold into the grid and then bought back because solar panel, you get a premium for it. And then my brother now is working on building a digester, and so they're going to be using the digester to create natural gas from the manure that's being produced. So those are some of the things. And then at the cheese factory itself, we've done some other things in terms of, we've taken out all of our normal grass that's kind of on the property, and then we planted a huge meadows. There's about 5-6 acres of wildflower meadows, and so we're in year 3 right now, so it doesn't look so terrible now. Like lots and lots of weeds for the first 2 years, but now finally I'm starting to see some flowers, which makes me very happy. And the birds and the bees, they love it, of course. And then we've got a EV charger here at the factory, which is not all just us being good to our customers. I just got an EV car myself, and so it's also partly for me, because my wife has one too. But we're trying to do little things here and there. And then I always think in terms of sustainability, being efficient at what you do is also key. And so just being good with your water use. Like, it's incredible the difference in water use between one factory and another factory in the dairy industry. And it annoys the crap out of me when people use way too much water to spray down things or for whatever. So that's always something that we're focusing on. But we also have to deal with the wastewater. And so the less water we use, the better for everything.
I mean, that's a lot. I feel like that's a lot that you guys have done. I feel silly asking this, but I guess we could all always do something more. Is there something more that you would like to do that's, maybe it's at this stage too big of a financial investment for you, but it's something that you thought about working towards?
So we've always wanted to do solar on our own roofs here at the cheese factory. There's a calculation that Hydro One does, and so we're not allowed to at this particular point in time because they say there's not enough capacity on the lines. I find that crazy because we would use it all anyways, but that's one thing that we've always wanted to do. And then beyond that, yeah, there's nothing that I'm thinking about specifically right now.
Is there anything in terms of packaging? Packaging is such a massive, and this is where I find the hardest part of the sustainability conversation, to talk about, because there seems to really not be that many great solutions. The amount of plastic that our industry puts out into the world is really not great. And there seems to not be really that many solutions. Are you aware of anything?
No. So yeah, packaging is a big one. Like because we use a lot of plastic basically to package our products. Food industry as a whole uses a pile of plastic. Uh Sometimes the way maybe this is more of a justification than anything else is like in the end, like wasted cheese is probably worse than anything else. And so being able to not make sure you're not wasting any cheese is important. But at the same time, yeah, trying to find a way, because like most of our prepackaged pieces are prepackaged in thermoform plastic. And I think they're like, I mean, there's trials on stuff that's made out of plant oils and whatnot, and that's quote unquote biodegradable. But I think at this point in time, nothing is actually commercial viable. I might be wrong on that, but I haven't seen anything out there yet.
I think it might just be starting to come up, but I think the reality is it probably would be financially impossible for most producers to go that route at this stage. But hopefully people that are, I don't know, in that realm are working on it for us.
Yeah, we had one other thought that we've been pushing around for a couple of years is that like kind of more, so when we do fresh cheese curds every Friday, most of them are in like those little deli containers or the 8 or the 16-ounce ones. And then one thought was like, okay, well, what about if people can just come and we'll have a big old bin and then we can just scoop curds into their container.
Oh, that's smart.
What makes me scared about that kind of thing is that say their container is not clean and then it contaminates the cheese and then they get sick later, and then it comes back to us. It's hard for us to prove that it wasn't our fault. So that makes me a little bit hesitant to do that. So
I
our
think
thought is to do a trial that maybe we'll just have like a mini like sanitizer bath. And so then when they bring in their container, our staff will grab it. And if it looks clean, they'll sanitize it and then away they go. And if it doesn't look clean, then they won't fill it up. But that's
yeah,
a thought that I'm having right now.
that's a pretty great idea, actually. I think that's awesome. I've seen some businesses put up a sign that says use your own, some kind of use your own container, but you assume the risk of contamination or something along that line so that it's like clearly stated. That could be something. I keep adding more questions to this because I think this is such an important conversation. If you were going to encourage another producer out there to take a step forward in sustainability, what would you say is like the best starting place that where could they start that would have like some kind of, pretty great impact and it's like easily attainable to put in place?
Oh, it's hard to know. Like there's lots of things that like, like building a digester on the farm is crazy expensive and not possible for most people. But at the same time, like to be honest, like my brother's not doing it because it's good for the environment. He's doing it because he's going to make money on it too. And so I think there's lots of incentives out there so that you can do things that are more sustainable, but also still like financially advantageous. And so that's probably the best starting point is finding like those things right there. Like reducing energy costs, for example, with more efficient equipment like this. First of all, there's usually grants out to help you with that kind of thing, but then you save on your energy costs in the long term too. So things like that. And what they might be, that might be different depending on the time or the area that you're in. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Okay. And it'll be like, 10th point of this question. What are your thoughts on climate impact in our region? We've seen weather change a lot in Canada in general. I can't believe what so many of my customers have dealt with this year alone with climate impact. What do you think about that in terms of cheese making, dairy farm, etc.? How's that going to impact your business moving forward?
So I think to be honest, like we're pretty fortunate in the area of the world that we live that's like some of the things that we'll see are more, I mean, what they're saying is we'll see more variable weather, which is seems to definitely be the case in the last couple of decades. But fortunately, like in a zone like ours, like we live in soils that can handle dry and they can handle wet, and so they handle that kind of variability a little bit better than say other types of soils like heavier clays, for example, or sandy type soils. Um, and in the cheese factory, we've noticed certain things, like, so for example, with more storms and whatnot, we've noticed a lot more power outages, and so then we've made steps to make sure that we have backup generators to. We never did for years and years, but now we do, just to make sure that we're prepared just in case something happens. I think on a small scale, it's going to just be more local kind of stuff, you know, and then when you're talking about global side of things, like, you probably will end up seeing way more variability in feed prices, for example. If there's a disaster in Brazil and things are super dry, for example, and soybean price goes to the roof, that's going to affect everybody everywhere in the world, anybody producing food. But at the same time, within the quota system, that kind of levels out a lot of those major swings as well, which is another way that I guess it stays a little bit more stable here than it would, say, in the United States, for example.
And we didn't see a lot of super hot days this summer in our region, but we have in years past, recent years past. Have you ever noticed a serious decrease in milk production in your cows on extended super hot weeks?
You do, yeah. Like this summer was actually cooler, quite a bit cooler than average in our area, and everything looks phenomenal. The corn is actually behind because it didn't have enough heat, quote unquote. And we had lots of rain. Everything was beautiful all the time. But yeah, once you get like those long extended heat periods, but farms have made steps too. Like they've got those huge fans nowadays, so that the cows can stay cooler. If you go to super hot climates like California and Arizona and whatnot, they've got all those misting systems, and I think you'll probably start to see more of that in Ontario too, if you're seeing a lot more heat. But there's still steps that can be done here to kind of make things more comfortable, so the cows aren't dropping off as fast, and that's what the farmers want too. And so they'll continue to do those kinds of things because they don't want to see production drop way off when it gets too hot.
No. Okay. Awesome. That was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So switching gears a little bit here, let's go back to one of the earlier things that you mentioned, which was Switzerland. So Switzerland has played a big role in shaping the style of cheese that you create. And you recently went back to Switzerland. Can you tell us about your trip there? Like, what did you experience? What was different about
Yeah.
the trip this time?
Um, yeah, I love Switzerland, and I'm sure if Ramon is on the call or Hans Weaver is on the call, they completely understand. But
No, it's my
every time
favorite
we
country. I love it so much. And yes, they
every
are.
time I go back there, I just want to go back there more.
Me too.
But this particular time, we went on a little trip, and so me, my wife, and my son, well, and we go on a European trip typically most summers, and then we just pick a country, pick three places, stay there for a couple days each, and then wherever we are, we always have to see some cheese related things because that's what we all love. So this summer, we were in Munich, Germany, and then we went to the Appenzell region of Switzerland. So Five Brothers is loosely based on an Appenzeller type cheese. And then there, one particular day was a little bit more of a business day where we set aside to visit a bunch of cheese factories. And then one of the things that we were looking at was, so as you can see behind Kelsey and Aaron, we've got lots of wheels of cheeses, and all those cheeses have to be washed or maintained on a regular basis. It's a whole lot of work in terms of the jobs that people want to do. It's right near the bottom. Like it's not the most fun job in the world.
Why?
Because it's so physically intense and monotonous. You can spend a day and you have to wash 3,000 wheels of cheese, and
And hard on your body.
yes, yes. Most of us are fairly young, but we're all getting a little bit older. So one of the things we're looking at is they make these beautiful robots in Switzerland that do the washing for you. So we visited a couple of factories where they have these robots in place, and there's a few different types. But like if you've ever seen the one at Fromagerie du Presbytère, basically it picks a wheel off at a time. Their wheels are quite huge, and it washes it, pops it back on the shelf. And then there's another type where the cheese will be on a board, and it pulls the board out, washes all the cheeses on the board, puts the board back on the shelf. La Station has one like that. Same with Fritz Kaiser in Costa Montreal. And so we were looking at something like that. Whether it's going to work out or not, I'm not quite sure, but it would sure be nice for some of the people that are sitting there washing cheeses all the time. And then also there's something special, like if you've seen those rooms in Switzerland where all the cheeses are on the boards and everything is just like straight up and down, everything looks so beautiful, all kind of together. I really, really like that. So maybe we'll see. It's not inexpensive, and so it's going to kind of probably come down to that. But hopefully we can make that work.
Oh, that's really awesome. So, having a bit of a gap in the years since you were previously in Switzerland, what has changed? We think of Swiss cheese as being very rooted in tradition. Are you seeing new cheeses, new techniques, new equipment?
Um, I I couldn't tell you very specifically. Like I think perhaps some like Ramon could tell you a bit more specifically, but I think it's difficult, just like a lot of places in the world, like especially the cheese factories that are kind of the village cheese factories, like financially it's more difficult these days. The Swiss franc is super strong, has been for a while now. So then they have to be efficient, they have to be super efficient at things. And so then there's all kinds of very specific equipment that makes their life easier, especially specifically from a personnel point of view. So um, like these robots in the rooms to wash the cheese. Also, like if you look at actually forming the wheels of cheese, they make these beautiful machines now, which basically pumps all the curd into a huge table. A big old lids comes down and it presses all the wheels individually. A company called Cult makes these, and it's quite fascinating how automated it's become. And I think that's partly because of necessity. Um, and then I also the place that I was at, his name is Manuel. So I worked with him for a little bit in British Columbia at Natural Pastures Cheese Company, and his place too, they're starting to just develop. So they make Appenzell, for example, the proper like AOC Appenzell, but they're also starting to make some other things that have similarities, but they have their own branding on them. And I think that's in an effort to try and sell a little bit more of their product just locally, rather than just to the bigger distributors like Emmy, for example, who will take all of the Appenzeller from their factory, age it to the appropriate time, and then send it off to whatever country it needs to go to.
Cool. It sounds like, you know, usually we think of a lot of European countries just being like so rooted in tradition and being static in so many ways that it's just always interesting to see like how they're changing with the times, with technologies, and facing current situations. So yeah, thank you for sharing.
I kind of want to follow up on the cost of equipment like that. And so I know sometimes there's government grants, money available to help offset the cost of a piece of equipment like that. Is that something that you would be hoping for? Are you willing to talk about that kind of financial investment and what that can mean for a business like yours?
Yeah, so there's I mean that's a big reason why we're looking at it right now, because it's been here for like 2 years now, but there's a program out. So a bunch of years ago, when CETA, which is the Canadian European Trade Agreement, got set up, the federal government gave away, I think it was 15% or 10% additional market share to the Canadian market that would have been quota free. And so then in response to that, they set up a program for the dairy farmers so that they could become a bit more efficient, and then one for the processors so we could become more efficient. They've done the same thing. I can't remember if it's in response to the Trans-Pacific Partnership or if it's in response to the new, whatever it's called, NAFTA. But this new one is the same thing. They created a fund for the farmers to become more efficient. And then also on the processing side, it's open for processors to encourage them to become more automated and things like that. And so this cheese washing robot kind of fits right in with that. And it's only open to processors and supply managed industries. So that'll be chicken and dairy, and then with preference to small and medium-sized enterprises. So we kind of fit right in that wheelhouse. And so hopefully we're able to take advantage of some of that, and that would definitely help out.
Cool. My fingers are crossed for you. That would be amazing. Okay, my next question for you. If a new cheesemaker approached you for advice, what are the first 3 things that you would share with them? Somebody looking to get into the business of making cheese.
3 things, eh?
3 things. They come to you, they're like, I'm
Yeah.
so inspired by what you're doing, Shep. I think I really want to follow this calling. It's the first 3 things you're going to say to them.
Typically, first thing that pops into my mind when people come to us, because it does happen fairly often, and we're open to discussions all the time. But I usually start out with a question, just kind of asking people, what they expect this to cost them getting into the industry, and the sly reasoning behind that question is just to see if they actually have like a at least a reasonable estimate of what this is going to cost them. Because if they're way out to lunch, then I'm going to try and break the news carefully to them, because it's not going to be cheap. But that's one thing, like just to be kind of prepared for what you're potentially getting into. Second thing is to kind of what you're going to do and how it's going to be different from the next person down the road. So I guess how you differentiate yourself. Those are 2 important things. And then 3, like maybe something to do with like, I guess what's your experience in terms of what are you bringing to the table or who are you gonna bring to the table that's gonna help make this happen? Because sometimes like getting the right people in your corner is pretty important, especially finding people that can kind of make up for areas where you might have where you don't have the skills or have less knowledge, for example. A good friend of mine who employs a whole bunch of people always talks about hiring people, for example, that are good at things that you're not good at. And that always resonates with me. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, because you can't do it all yourself.
No. And there's other people that are way better at certain things than you are, no matter what.
And sort of a follow-up to something you just said there, differentiating yourself from the market. Have you ever taken some time to think about, like, is there something that you would identify that's missing from maybe the Canadian cheese scene, but maybe even more local to you, the Ontario cheese scene, that you think somebody could come along and do?
Sometimes like things pop into my head. Like I don't know actually if there's like if this is true or not, but like when I was in France, for example, a bunch of years ago, one thing, like you're in France and like there's just so many of these tiny little goat cheeses everywhere. Just these little you got the Valençays and whatnot, but these tiny little things, and I don't know what they're all called, but they all taste phenomenal. I'm like, you don't see any of that here. And I don't know if that's because we don't want them here. Like there's not the demand for it, or just it's too much of a pain to make all those tiny little cheeses. I know it's probably difficult to import them because a lot of them are fairly fresh, and then once they get too far, they just get kind of gross. But that's one thing I always thought about. I would never do something like that because there's so many tiny little things that seems like a lot of labor to me. But that's one thought that I had. Another one that I think about sometimes is blue cheeses. Like blue cheese is crazy popular. Um, I love blue cheese. I can eat blue cheese all day, every day. And there's not a lot of Ontario blue cheese. It's like I might be wrong here, but I know there's a couple of really small places making some. Margaret is making some at Glengarry, but other than that, there's not a whole lot happening in Ontario in the blue cheese industry. And so sometimes I think, oh, we need to make a blue cheese, but we just don't have the design, I guess, because that I don't want that blue mold growing on my five brothers, for example.
Yeah, what would it take for you to do something like that? Because certainly there's a lot of cheesemakers out there who do add a blue to their production facility and they're making other styles of cheese, but you would have to set yourself up differently. What would it take?
Yeah, I think I would just have to have a special space for it. I don't see the production space being a problem or the aging spaces. And yeah, like if you look at a lot of the major or the key artisan cheesemakers in Quebec, they've all got a blue cheese line that goes with a bunch of their other stuff, which is kind of and I'm sure they've kind of got it sorted out how that works.
Yeah.
And
Cool.
then just a few extra hours in the day to do another cheese too, right?
Yeah, just pop it in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. One question that we love to ask all of our guests is what would you like to see in the Canadian cheese industry 5 years from now?
Oh, give me 1 second.
Okay. Everybody can
Could be
have
10
their
years or
snack.
7. So to look
Hopefully,
forward into the future.
hopefully, like kind of, I guess some of the success that you see in the Quebec cheese industry could potentially be spread to other parts of the province. So I mean, I don't know what the numbers are right now, but I know there's still substantially more small cheese plants there than there are here in Ontario, for example, or British Columbia, or Alberta, or any other province for that matter. Um, and there's something neat about what they're doing there. Also, just like it seems like they've got a number of organizations, like they've got their awards, the KZS Awards, and they've got that I can't remember the name of that other organization that does consulting and whatnot. And so there's some neat things happening there, and like maybe it can kind of spread across the country and be more nationwide, I guess we would say. So that's one thing. So yeah, hopefully, a little bit more different things happening here. And then also, one thing I too also find, like in the American cheese scene, for example, I find that there might be perhaps a little bit more innovation happening there. Like people are trying different things all the time. I feel part of that is due to competition. Like things are crazy competitive in the American dairy business on a farm level, but also at the cheese level, and so that pushes some of that innovativeness. And so I think it'd be kind of cool to see a little bit more of that happening here. Like if you look at what some of the interesting American artisan cheese plants are doing, they're always kind of trying something new and pushing the envelope a bit.
There was a question earlier that kind of fits into something that you just said there. And I think because, there's so much promotion around cheese in Quebec as well, within Quebec, that, there's really a lot of marketing money behind cheese in Quebec. And so the question was, could the DFO and or Foodland Ontario do more to promote Ontario artisanal cheese, do you think?
I think they do some stuff to support the cheese industry. Like this is anecdotal, so it's just based on my experiences. Like I feel like before, when it was under the Canadian Dairy Commission, not the Canadian Dairy Commission, Dairy Farmers of Canada, I think more was happening specifically around artisan cheeses at that point in time, and less is happening now. Um, it's only been a couple of years that DFO has kind of taken over that marketing thing, so hopefully things kind of come around. Like I think some choices, like maybe this will get me in trouble, but like putting a milk label on the Toronto Maple Leaf jerseys is just it's not going to do too much. But maybe like getting people to taste more Ontario products is going to help a bit more.
And so what would you, I mean, it's not going to get you in trouble. I think, we're all in this industry and we all want to see this industry continue to grow. So would that be sort of bringing sampling programs back into stores? Like we lost a lot of that through the pandemic. We've definitely started to see it come back. We've got Wendy and Roxanne on this call tonight who are out there sampling continually, which is fantastic. But is that what you think needs to come back? Is in-store sampling more aggressively?
I think that definitely helps for sure. I think even just things like, and I maybe they have data on this, but they used to have that beautiful thing happening at the Royal for the entire 10 days where the the Dairy Farmers of Canada had that booth, and then they were doing those cheese sessions. I think I don't know if Debbie's on the call, but Debbie was often
Yep,
involved in that, and
she's
they were
there.
always super educational, and I think people seem to love them. And so that was those were kind of neat things that were happening too. But yeah, also just at a store level, um, just trying to promote different products, because whenever you sample, like things do better, and
Yeah,
so sales go up. But the idea is not that they just go up for that day, but that they go up in the future as well.
Yeah.
that's great. Kelsey?
We have so many great questions that have been dropped into the chat here. So we're going to try to get through as many as we can. Let's do a quick lightning round. We'll just toss a bunch of questions your way, and you can just give a quick response, and then we'll just keep going on to the next question. So, from Roxanne, what is your typical work week like? Like, how many hours are you working on the average week?
You might get a different story from me or from Colleen, but I would say about 60. Um, which is it used to be a little bit worse, but my line between work and play and is not the same as most people's line. Like I live right next to the cheese factory, so it's not like, oh, this is work and this is fun. Like they all just gets blurred together. Like we were just talking about before, we went to Niagara on the Lake this past weekend and we had lots of fun tasting wine at wineries, but we just went to visit customers, and so work and play just kind of squished together. But I would say about 60. Yeah.
Wow, that's keeping you pretty busy. From Sean Miles out in Nova Scotia, how many employees do you have, and what's the approximate annual production amount that you do?
So there's 8 of us in total. 6 of us are full time. Um, and then annually, well, we process about a million liters of milk a year. That's kind of the target. And that's like what 90% of what the farm is producing.
Nice. From Martin Raymond, how difficult is it to maintain your cultures? I guess, do you, what's your culture situation?
So for the cultures for the cheeses, we're just using freeze-dried cultures. And so that is quite straightforward. In the aging rooms, it's a bit more difficult, especially mostly in the wash rind department. So we add a culture to or a culture blend to the actual milk for the wash rind culture, and then we don't do anything beyond that. Um, but we really, really always have to focus on this one because little things can change, and then all of a sudden some of the yeast start getting out of control, and then the cheese starts getting too sticky and a little bit smelly. And um, we do a way better job now than we used to about maintaining that balance in the aging rooms, but that's really about maintaining the specific environment and also making sure that the cheeses going in there are going in there the way they're supposed to be.
Cool. Got one more that I did a screen grab of. So it's from Girth, and Girth's asking if you could produce certified lactose-free cheese. Is that something on your radar that you've considered or you'd look into?
I haven't looked into that, no. But it is well worth looking into because I there's like it's like Jarlsberg or something like that. It's certified lactose free. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I don't know how they get that certification, but that would actually be advantageous because people always ask, is it lactose free? Well, I can't guarantee that it's lactose free, but it's pretty darn close to being lactose free, especially in aged cheese. And so that would be curious to see what their specific rules are about what is like what the threshold is about how much lactose you can have before you can consider lactose free.
I would be curious about that too, because I can tell you from like a cheesemonger perspective from in the store, that's definitely a question that gets asked often. And most cheesemongers have like a short little go-to list of certified lactose-free cheeses in their offering that they'll like, here's what I have for you. And then after they present that little list, they'll say, but just so you know, like anything that's aged, this amount of time or older really has like trace amounts of lactose left in it. So to get yourself part of that like little list that
Yeah.
says it's like totally lactose free would be definitely beneficial. There was a question too that I saw from Yvette. She was sort of asking about raw milk, looser regulations around raw milk cheeses. I'll just go and say, what's your thought on raw milk, and was it ever something that you considered for Gunn's Hill?
So we just started off right off the bat with pasteurized milk. The main reason behind that was the fact that we were producing some cheeses that were aged for less than 60 days and some cheeses that were more. And so the problem when you do both is that you have to be a lot more careful about keeping things apart from each other. And so then it's more straightforward to go with purely uh, pasteurized products. And then at the same time, the difference between thermalization and pasteurization is not that big. So most raw milk cheeses, or a lot of raw milk cheeses, are actually thermalized. But that said, like I always feel like with raw milk, things swing around more depending on the quality of the milk. You can end up with something that's really spectacular, or maybe something that's a little bit less more subpar. So pasteurization helps to level those swings, but you are probably going to miss out on some of those scenarios where you could have something that's just really special, and pasteurization kind of takes that out of the equation a little bit.
And so as a cheesemaker, have you ever like wanted to try making Five Brothers with raw milk just to see? Have you ever done it?
Well, I did it way back when I was not making cheese officially, when I was just at the farm making cheese in the milk house. And there was some things that I ran into that pasteurization helped with, but also at the same time, like some things were pretty neat there too. So at this stage in the game, that's not somewhere that we're thinking about going anymore. And it's just not, I guess, it's just a little bit easier the way that we do it right now. And then we're all set up to do it now. And that's part of the conversation too, because the actual pasteurizer is an expensive piece of equipment. And so when you got it, you might as well use it.
Yeah. All right. What do you think, Kelsey?
I think there's one last question I'd love to get at, and then we've got a few announcements. So Karen asks, on the cost education front, with education being limited in Canada, is the US or Europe better location / investment to train in? So a couple of things I'm going to preface this with is we're seeing some really exciting things happening in terms of education here in Canada. So on the call today, we've got Marianne Ferrer from the University of Guelph, and she's a previous guest on these calls, and she's developed a really cool cheesemaker program. And there's upcoming courses offered on a regular basis, and they've got a pilot plant as well, where new cheesemakers come to test out batches before they invest in their own facilities. So really cool things happening there. Cool things happening at Conestoga College as well. And it's, from my perspective, pretty exciting seeing what's going on in Canada right now. Though I think the pandemic did throw a wrench in things a little bit. But Shep, would love to hear your thoughts. What's going on the cheese education front?
Yeah, like you've got those two. I mean, you've got the Guelph program with a bunch of different classes, and then also the Conestoga one. And then, I mean, there's probably lots of positions that are needing to be filled. Unfortunately, I guess there's not as much demand for those classes as maybe we were hoping there would be. So for example, I know that the intro to cheese making class at Guelph had to be delayed a couple of times just because of lack of interest, which was too bad because we were hoping to send a few people there. But hopefully, people will start to want to enter something like this. From our side of things, like up to this point in time, we've just trained people on the job. And so at this point in time, there's 3 of us that work in production, and then the others, they've only been here. Well, one of them's actually been here for about 3 years. The other one, Morgan's been for a year and a half. And they're quite good at what they do right now, but they could use, I guess, a little bit more formal education in terms of, what's going on from a scientific point of view. And so hopefully we can get them enrolled in a couple of classes, and they might not be able to finish a whole program, but at least, they'll get a better background, and not just exactly the specific stuff that we do, but a little bit more around it, which would be great for their development too. But yeah, like, next time, because these programs are all still fairly new, it would be pretty cool to be able to hire somebody that has some experience already. And that's what's kind of been interesting in the past. Like, I know where I worked at Natural Pastures Cheese Company in BC, they were always bringing people in, students more or less from Switzerland, but it was a great way to kind of have cheesemakers with some education, but also kids that were looking for a great experience work at a place like theirs.
Awesome. This has been a great conversation, and partially because of all these awesome questions that we got from everybody on the call too. So thank you everybody for participating, and especially thank you to Shep. I'm sure you're tired. I'm sure your day starts very early. So thank you so much for coming tonight.
Yeah, thank you. I'm definitely a morning person, so I don't mind starting early. That's the way I like things.
So before we wrap up, two announcements. So first of all, the American Cheese Society is going to be hosting their next conference July 10th to 13 in Buffalo, New York. So Buffalo being right on the border, I think we can get a wonderful big group of people from Canada there. I'd love to see a big contingent of Canadians together at the ACS conference. And in addition, I think it would be a perfect opportunity for Canadians to take home all the ribbons from the cheese competition. So with it being right on the border, let's show them how great Canadian cheese is. So on that note, I have to call out Marianne Frere of the University of Guelph because of this past year, she consolidated the majority of the cheese that was shipped to the US for the cheese competition. And this was the first year in the ACS history that all Canadian cheese arrived at the at the competition on time and in perfect condition. So big thanks to Marianne there. That's incredible. It's never happened before, and Marianne was called out during the competition, and big thanks to her from the organizing committee. So Marianne is going to be organizing another shipment of cheese to the ACS competition. So let's show the Americans what we've got. There's incredible cheese being made here, and if you're interested in consolidating some shipments to the US, let's chat. So feel free to reach out to Marianne, myself, or Aaron, and we can point you in the right direction.
And we've got the Royal Winter Fair competition coming up in like a few short weeks. It's a little bit late. Some new management. Kudos to Debbie and Connie, who did an amazing job for so many years, but they've now retired from that position, and it's moving forward still, which is great. So if there's any cheesemakers on the call right now, we would encourage you to submit your product to the Royal Winter Fair as well. It's good competition coming up, like the 19th. So I think the due date is in a couple weeks.
Awesome. One last announcement. Do you want to take the last one there, Aaron, or?
What is it? The next session?
Yeah, next session.
Yeah, the next session is what did we decide on? November 6th, I believe.
November 6th, yes.
November 6th, we have this is a great session. This is an important session as well. If you want to like take your cheese sensory analysis knowledge to the next level, we've got Alex Armstrong we're going back to Jasper Hill for another awesome training session with he's White and Curdy on Instagram. Alex Armstrong is in charge of affinage at Jasper Hill and sensory analysis. So he's going to do like a little sensory analysis 101 session with us. So everybody gets to learn what the heck that means and how to like take the step forward into learning more about it. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, we might even be each doing our own spider graphs of cheese during the call. So cool. Be ready.
Come and learn how to do a spider graph with Alex Armstrong.
Yeah. And you'll probably recall we had Trevor Wormadal on a previous call. So he was last year's Daphne Zeppos Teaching Award winner. Alex Armstrong is this year's award winner. So very excited to host him and hear about his vision for his research.
And then we break for the end of the year again. So we've got one more session November 6th, and then that'll be it until the new year with more information to follow. After that, Bertha's saying any upcoming cheesemonger competitions. I don't know if the Cheesemonger Invitational is happening in January. Sometimes it does in San Francisco, but I don't know if they're doing it this year.
Yeah, usually happens same time as it's the fancy food show. But I want to say big thank you once again to Shep. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. And thank you to everybody else for joining tonight too.
Yes, thank you so much for coming, everybody.
Yeah, this is fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Awesome. Bye, guys. Have a good night.
Bye.